Unlock the path to healing with Exposed podcast. Join us as therapists from around the world break mental health taboos, share powerful stories, and provide insights that transform lives. Tune in, educate, and thrive.
There's a lot of studies showing that art making in any form, in any capacity, helps lower cortisol in the body, helps lower defenses in the body, helps your ego take a back seat position in the therapeutic process, right? And so it really helps in brain plasticity.
Hello and welcome to Expose the podcast. In this episode, we are going to have very special guest, Jordan Faver. She is the founder and owner of Faver Creative, a consulting private office in Texas. As a trauma-informed licensed professional consultant, registered art therapist, and woman anxiety coach, Jordan specializes in treating anxiety, depression, and PTSD in young adults and adult women. She incorporates art making into her sessions using different type of therapeutic approaches, and she's also certified in ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. Recently, Jordan has been nominated as the DFW Child Magazine Mom Approved Healthcare Professional. Jordan is dedicated to empowering women through creative expression. Please let me welcome Jordan.
Hi, Anastasia. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
You are an expert in art therapy. You have been working with adolescents and adults in this approach. Could you explain for us what is art therapy and how does it help brain to heal?
Yeah. So I don't know if I'm necessarily an expert yet. I don't know that I feel that way, even though I'm maybe skilled in it, but
Very humble. Very humble.
well, art therapy is used for everybody in the counseling experience that might not know or understand how to process their emotions or experience. So in the same way that regular, counselors use talk therapy, I use art in my sessions. So I'm trained as an art therapist and a counselor, and they go hand in hand with each other. So it's kind of a quick way to get to the core of an issue when somebody is not necessarily understanding how to put words to their experience, if that makes sense.
And how does it help the brain? Is there like a research showing that combination actually in some way helps to heal from like post-traumatic disorder? Or could you speak on that a little bit? If anyone, like people who have deep trauma, can actually do the art therapy, or they should always do it combined with others?
Yeah, absolutely. So I love working with depression, anxiety, and PTSD primarily because it does work so well. Obviously, as we all know, counseling and regular talk therapy works really well in the healing process, right? Whereas you add art into the mix, and then you have this expedited, even magnified healing process. There's a lot of studies showing that art making in any form, in any capacity, helps lower cortisol in the body, helps lower defenses in the body, helps your ego take a back seat position in the therapeutic process, right? And so it really helps in brain plasticity and helping form new habits. It helps heal the brain and just recover from trauma in so many ways, like especially having a facilitated, guided experience with somebody that's trained in art making and the therapeutic process and in what materials to use at what time, right? So, for example, I wouldn't use the same materials on somebody struggling with anxiety as I would maybe with somebody that has bipolar or schizophrenia at first. So, making sure that you are doing art therapy with a licensed art therapist is also something to point out because it's a very different process than somebody who's just utilizing art making in their sessions, who's not actually trained in material usage and diagnoses and all that. But yes, it helps heal the brain. Absolutely.
Thank you. And for those who are doing some research and want to try art therapy, um, is there a way for them to really find, you know, someone who really is specialized versus someone who just has some short course? How would you, do you have any advices on how someone can find really expertise in this art therapy approach?
Yes, absolutely. So, the American Art Therapy Association website is where somebody would want to go to find an actual ATR, which is registered art therapist. You can look on your map, you can see who's in your vicinity. Psychology Today is another one, but they actually don't identify art therapists as a primary licensure, which is kind of a bummer. So you might see art therapy in somebody's bio, but if you search art therapist, not as much is going to come up, or you might not have as reliable results as if you go straight to the source, which would be the American Art Therapy Association website. I believe it's aata.org.
Oh, that's so helpful. Thank you. I can put the link below for those interested after watching the interview with you. And also, could you share with us what's trauma-informed consulting?
Yeah, so trauma-informed therapy and trauma-informed treatment is going to be comprised of 6 different components. These are safety, transparency, peer support, collaboration, voice and choice or self-empowerment, and cultural, historical, and gender responsive treatment modalities. So there are 6 components that really comprise of trauma-informed treatment, which means somebody's going to understand and view you as a whole human with lots of experiences that have led you to this point, whether that's in medical, like in health treatment, regular medical care, such as your physician or your OB-GYN, or somebody in mental health, a social worker. Also, school counselors and personnels and teachers are learning a lot of trauma-informed methods to use in the classroom because we are understanding now in society that everyone has trauma. And so it's very important to understand somebody sitting in front of you has so many different things going on in their own life, and they've been through so much before the encounter that you are having in front of them, if that makes sense. So understanding the person as a whole instead of just their symptoms is very, very important. And I am a huge advocate of that. Like, if you don't feel heard and seen, and if you don't feel like your medical providers or your mental health care providers are asking trauma-informed questions in your intake, it is okay to move on to the next person. Like, there are plenty out there, and you will find one that fits you well for your treatment.
Thank you for sharing all of that. And could you share what are some typical signs of trauma? Like you mentioned that now we know that almost all of us has some type of trauma. Could you share for the audience who has no idea about the symptoms, and what are some silent traits which can be really easily unseen, or like not really taken seriously?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the first one that comes to mind is whenever somebody's encountered trauma, it's hard to focus, right? So, like inability to focus, having brain fog, having fatigue, mental, physical, emotional fatigue, not being able to identify or regulate emotions is another one. Feeling dissociated or maybe out of touch with your body or your thoughts, kind of like a third person perspective on yourself could be one. And then there's other physical symptoms. Somebody who has experienced trauma might have chronic pain, might have headaches, might have even like an autoimmune disorder, which those things are out of my scope of practice, but I have a great referral network for people that come into my office and are experiencing those. And I think it's very important for clinicians, for mental health clinicians to know and understand that mental health is not just about the mental, right? Like everything manifests on the mental before it ever becomes physical in our body. So if somebody is coming to my office with physical ailments and they have encountered trauma, probably goes back to something that they encountered that affected their mental health at the very beginning.
Thank you, Jordan, for speaking on that. And some professionals accept insurance, others don't. Um, and could you share a little bit about the reasons? Why is that?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So I do not accept insurance, and I am I advocate for cash pay practices because insurance, they don't, unfortunately, they don't really care about you or your well-being, right? Like it's a money maker for them. So as a therapist, for example, if I accept somebody's insurance, I'm going to call up their insurance or I'm going to file a claim and they're going to say, okay, we want a diagnosis first and foremost. So they expect me to give somebody a diagnosis in the first 50 minutes of meeting them. I do not believe that it is my job or my right necessarily to give somebody a label that's going to follow them or that they're going to identify with personally for the rest of their lives, right? Yes, I am trained and yes, I'm equipped to diagnose. That is part of my training in my master's program, but I don't want to do it. So, number one is that they require a diagnosis in 50 minutes. Number two, every session, I have to put in brief notes about what our session entailed, how you're doing, how you're feeling, just little brief updates about where you're at in your therapeutic experience. They have a right to read those at any time, which is essentially, I think, a HIPAA violation, right? Nobody else is allowed to read those notes. But if insurance can come in and read them, like we don't know who those people are. They're not usually healthcare providers. As a matter of fact, I mean, nobody is if they're working in insurance, right? Some of them don't have that background. They also might only give a certain amount of sessions that are covered. So let's say somebody comes in with major depressive disorder, and they say, okay, we want you to completely heal, fix this person in 6 sessions. You and I both know that that is not possible, especially from a treatment informed perspective, right? Like that's going to take sessions and sessions and sessions to work through trauma, and build a therapeutic relationship where somebody's willing to really dive in. It's going to go way past 6 weeks, fortunately and unfortunately, right? And then another reason is that that diagnosis goes on your medical record forever. So if you accept insurance, you're required to give a diagnosis. That is the really sticky part of this, right? Like if insurance did not require a diagnosis, I might be more willing to take it and accept it. Besides the fact that it takes up a lot of time in a clinician's schedule, and a lot of insurance-based clinicians are totally fried and burn out. But that diagnosis can stay on somebody's record forever. And so let's say a 17-year-old comes in and they get a diagnosis of major depressive disorder. When they go to apply for, let's say, a life insurance policy at the age of 30 or 40, in some states, they will be denied that policy because they were depressed as a teenager. And a lot of people don't know this information, right? It's a lot easier to say, well, I have insurance, I pay for it, I need to use it. And then I have this conversation with, potential clients, and they're like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for letting me know this information. I had no idea. And most of the public doesn't, and it's so unfortunate. So that is why I don't accept it.
Wow. That's so, you know, it makes me feel like why we don't know about that, but it makes sense why because of, you know, because the people who don't want us to know, they pay big money to make sure um, we use the insurance. So they can get so much data, and also that diagnosis is not needed because so many people actually take it as an identity, and it impacts the self-esteem and self-worth and getting job relationships. So I didn't know that. So thank you so much for speaking on it. And could you share a little why is it so why not everyone accept interns when it comes to interns working at some psychology center? What's the reason behind that?
Yeah. So before we move on to the question, I also wanted just to add really quick that insurance is appropriate and necessary for a lot of people in the care that they're getting, right? Like, I don't want to bash on insurance and say that it's a really bad thing, because it's not for a lot of people. There are people that use it to their advantage, and it's great, especially if they're getting, physical, medical health treatment. Let's say somebody has to go to the ER, right? That is when insurance is really useful. And the last thing that I just wanted to say to wrap up the last question was that I'm just a very big believer in growth mindset. And I think putting these labels and diagnoses and identities on clients and patients causes them to withdraw from the growth process, from the healing process, right? They think, oh, well, I've got this diagnosis. That must be the end all be all. I'm not fixable. Right. And I just so believe in resilience and brain plasticity and healing and the healing journey and what counseling can provide in that safe place. I don't want somebody to come in and feel stuck, right? I want to get people unstuck. And I think putting that label on people is really going to hinder them in that process. So to answer your next question, so going into why some agencies might not take interns, I think it's a liability thing, honestly. Interns, they're not fully trained yet, right? And so they don't know, you really don't know much until you get into the field. Going to graduate school and being in an office, being in an agency, being in a school or an alternative program or a hospital setting is so very different from school. So we are taught how to sit with clients, how to be unconditionally positive and have this really empathetic regard for clients when we're in school. And then you get thrown into the real world after that. And it's like, I don't know how to navigate this. And so I think that there are some agencies that just don't truly want to mess with it, right? So that's the only thing that I can really think of. When I become a supervisor, I would love to have interns, because you have to have experience to get experience and vice versa, right? So we need it. Like, I needed my internship to graduate, and I love to train and teach, but maybe some people don't feel equipped to do that either. It takes a lot of energy and a lot of patience and dedication to take on an intern and to have the capacity to train them and take them to sites and counsel them through their counseling process. So I would imagine that that is the reason why, if I had to guess, but I haven't had any personal experience with it, so I'm not totally sure.
Mm. Well, thank you for being so open and sharing, your thoughts on it, because that's really, really getting into the point that we need more interns, but it might be, lack of some experience, and also it's like so delicate. Every single case, we want to make sure the patient really gets help and not being in any way uh, like maybe not feeling comfortable with the interns on the side. So
Yeah,
That
absolutely. That
and could you so coaching, it's such a big thing, since I think the COVID came, there was like so many coaching sessions online everywhere I go on YouTube. Do you need a coach, or like, are you struggling? Here I am, the solution for your life. Just click here. So could you talk about the difference between coaching and consulting, and how actually someone who has no idea can determine if a coach is qualified?
Yeah, absolutely. So anybody can call themselves a coach, which is how it gets a little sticky, right? Of course, they're experts in their field and they can call themselves a coach. And, I would say if you're interviewing this person and you feel confident in their package that they're offering and their skills and um, everything that they're going to teach you and train you on, that's great, right? But unfortunately, coaches don't have to have any type of training or certification or anything to call themselves a coach, right? And it gets dangerous in mental health specifically when somebody is looking for a depression coach or an anxiety coach or a PTSD coach. They exist, and they are not going to somebody who is licensed in mental health, right? Like that could be very, very dangerous. So I always recommend that somebody looking for a coach find somebody who is an LPC or a like a licensed social worker, has some sort of mental health licensure whenever they're looking for a coach. Also, coaches can advertise themselves across state lines, so they are not bound by state guidelines or ethics, whereas a licensed professional in mental health, such as an LPC, is bound by state lines. They have a ruling board of ethics. They have lots of people over them for checks and balances to make sure that they are doing the right thing, right? Coaches don't have any of that. So I always think it's better to find somebody who's a coach who's also an LPC and calls themselves a coach. Um, Coaching is also not based on medical necessity if somebody does hold that licensure. So let's say I do an intake with somebody who's needing coaching, but I can see that they struggle from PTSD. I'm going to automatically recommend that they go to counseling instead, right? Because PTSD is a medical diagnosis, even though I don't accept insurance and don't diagnose. I know that that person needs more help than what coaching would provide. Okay, so coaching is coming to me, somebody coming to me looking for coaching would need something such as stress management or symptom reduction or help navigating life stressors like day-to-day stuff. It's very present and future oriented, whereas counseling is based on the past, working up to the future and how it affects you now.
Thank you. So that gives you an idea, that what's the difference, and that it is safer for anyone to actually go for the credentials, and that gives you some, I feel like, information that you are opening up to someone who has spent those years at school. And I think that's a fundament which many of us, for many of us it's important. Let's talk about ketamine therapy.
Yeah.
I like the energy with that question. we
I'm
should we should start it with this question then.
excited.
How does it work, and who can benefit from it?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so ketamine-assisted psychotherapy is it is taking ketamine in the presence of a certified provider, a clinician. LPCs can get trained to provide ketamine psychotherapy, which means we don't prescribe. We don't do the prescription part of it. You would have a medical evaluation with somebody and then bring in your prescription to the office. That is how I am going to facilitate mine. I just finished up my training and I'm really excited about it. There are also IV clinics where you can go get ketamine through an IV, which is the same but also a different experience. So I'll talk about mine because I'm not doing IV treatment. But ketamine provides you the opportunity to go into an altered state of consciousness, kind of like a dissociated state, a very calm state of mind, where your kind of like art therapy works, but this is more forced. It's very quick to get to the kind of the root of the issue. But it allows your body to relax, your mind to relax, so that things that you might have suppressed over time or wanted to avoid, wanted to ignore, come to surface a little bit easier. And then you have a clinician that works with you for about 2 hours after the actual ketamine treatment to process what came up for you during that time. So, a full ketamine treatment session, a dosing session, is about 3 hours long. And this is where I'm going to integrate art therapy in with ketamine assisted psychotherapy, because I think the art and the ketamine is going to help PTSD survivors, first responders, veterans, trauma survivors exponentially. But it takes the brain back to a pre-chronic stress state. It actually heals the brain in real time, which sounds kind of crazy and too good to be true. Um, but you see, for example, they've done some studies of ketamine with monkeys, and they do before and after scans of the brain, monkeys who are under chronic stress, doing experiments with them, unfortunately. And then after ketamine, and their brain is back to what it was pre-stress, before the experiments were done on them. Their brain looks the same, if not healthier than it was before, which I think is really incredible. So it really expedites the healing process. In about 6 to 8 ketamine sessions, they say that's worth about 2 years of therapy. Like if you were going to a therapist weekly for 2 years, that is how quickly you can get through some of your therapy experience in about 4 to 6 weeks doing ketamine.
Wow, that's that's great information. Um, is the ketamine treatment for everyone, like someone who doesn't have a big trauma, but more maybe middle mild depression or like postpartum depression?
Yes, that's such a good question. It's for everybody, minus thyroid conditions or heart conditions. Really are the two big ones that we need to be really, really cautious and mindful of when using ketamine. But ketamine can be used for somebody who is treatment resistant, so has tried everything in the past, has never made progress, or feels like they haven't made any progress in their therapeutic journey. It can be somebody looking for a spiritual experience. It can be somebody who doesn't want to try antidepressants or anti anxiety medications, somebody that just kind of wants to um, utilize the dissociative experience or the different state of consciousness to heal rather than taking a medication every day. It can be somebody who is curious, just wants to like open up their mind, heal some stuff, bring up some stuff that they might have suppressed over time, learn more about themselves, gain more self-awareness or insight. Like it can be used for literally everything. I'm such a big believer.
Do you need to repeat those sessions after a while, or is the results permanent?
That's a good question too. So there are lots and lots of people who are in remission now after, 2 and 3 years, even from their PTSD or anxiety or depression symptoms that they came in with when they started ketamine sessions. So really to get started, you're looking at 6 to 8 dosing sessions. It's anywhere from 15 to 20 total sessions. And you are doing those in a smaller amount of time because the closer together you have these sessions, the higher the efficacy, the higher the rate of lasting effect on that person. So then people come in for maintenance sessions, maybe 2 to 3 times a year after that, until they feel a lot better down the road.
Thank you so much for all that explanation. I'm so excited that you are specialized in it and you're going to help so many people. Um, is there, as we are getting to the end of the interview, is there any topic I missed and you feel like I would like to really talk about it? Or
Hmm. Honestly, I don't think so. I feel like this was pretty comprehensive about
yeah,
about me and what I do and what I'm an expert in. I don't I feel so weird about that word. It's probably imposter syndrome coming up, but No, I love what I do. I think the passion is evident in my work. I have a new office space, so I'm seeing clients in person, and I'm going to start ketamine treatment very soon. I'll be utilizing art therapy and ketamine-assisted psychotherapy in Texas. I'll be one of fewer than 100 ketamine psychotherapists in Texas, which is really, really cool, about an hour south of Fort Worth. So if you hear anybody that needs it, let me know. Then I also have coaching availability, which I love working with women, specifically high achieving women who are struggling with things like imposter syndrome and identity, self-worth, empowerment, authenticity, stuff like that. Like, let's help you get unstuck. So I can work with anybody across the US who needs a coach, a woman's coach. And then I have availability in Texas for in-person and virtual sessions for counseling and coaching and art therapy.
That's another reason to travel to Texas.
Yes, let's meet. Let's meet. I would love to.
Hey, Jordan, could you share at the end on this, what's the background story? Like, why did you decided to open your own office and actually not only become therapist and help people, but instead of working for, like hospital, someone else, you created your own business and at such a young age. So could you share a little bit on that?
Yeah. I have done my time in agencies, at a nonprofit, at IOPs, and all the programs. But what I came to find out was that there's very little work-life balance in working for those places. Unfortunately, in the American system, in the mental health system, therapists and social workers are severely underpaid and highly overworked. And I have a toddler right now, and I've been married for 5 years, and I want to spend time with my family. Like, family comes first, right? If we're not spending the majority of our life at home with our people, what are we doing? And I think that's part of the system, right? Like, a 40-hour week is so normalized. And so to be in those places and to take on the heavy, heavy, draining workload, like, kudos to the people that are in those spaces. But me, I don't like insurance. I don't like people telling me what I can and can't do. I want to do my own thing, and the way that I approach therapy and how I believe about it works really, really well with the clients that I see. And so that's a little bit about why I opened a private practice. I also love art making with clients in the room. So I'm excited to be back in person after being virtual for so long post-COVID. But as far as my story and how I got started and came to become a therapist is, I mean, personal experience, right? Like, we all have it. I was raised by an art teacher, so she instilled art in me from a very, very young age, creativity, creative expression, and then a Marine veteran. So I had the hard knocks and I had the very sweet, sensitive, both, go hand in hand, which is kind of how I came to be. But I had life experiences, and just lived in a state of chronic stress and anxiety for such a long time, and then experienced my own therapy and the magic and the healing of that I was like, I know that this is what I want to do. So getting to merge art and helping people and my love for people, seeing people healed and succeed, is the greatest calling on my life. So I love what I do. I'm so honored and blessed to be doing it, and can't wait to see what happens in the next 5 years of private practice.
I'm so glad you chose your family and your child over, work. And I think that's a strong value to have. And I hope we all can live more authentically, because it's not so easy to actually live this way. But I'm so happy you shared, because that will bring more, message that, yeah, living authentically is possible. And we need to many times to be the first ones to say, like, hey, this is, because I bet you are one of the first people in your family maybe who are like, hey, I'm going to do my own business and this is how I want it. And so That's kudos to you. Thank you so much for being on the show, Jordan Faver. Jordan Faver. Make
Oh.
sure to follow Jordan on social media. I'm going to add all the links. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you, Jordan, for being the guest. It has been pleasure and so much wisdom and knowledge, and I'm so excited for you now what you are doing in the world. It's beautiful, beautiful work. And the ketamine treatment, make sure to follow.
Yes, thank you for having me, Anastasia. I enjoyed it. And thank you for starting your podcast and getting the word out there about mental health. That is so necessary too. So thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this interview, and please subscribe my YouTube channel. For you, it's a one click. For me, it means the possibility to continue creating impact in the world with those videos. Thank you, and see you soon.